With Derrick Henry, I think it's going to be a very minimal impact overall. I already mentioned his ability to be used in the passing game when called upon. Maybe that overall opportunity comes down a little bit. But last year, Derrick Henry faced a stack box, 8+ defenders, 38% of the time. That was the second most across the NFL, only behind Tyler Algier. What does DeAndre Hopkins do for this offense from a rushing perspective? Assuming Kyle Phillips is healthy, he can run out of the slot. You have Treylon Burks, you have DeAndre Hopkins. We'll see if they change their philosophy and they run out of 11 personnel a little bit more. But typically, we see a direct correlation between a rise in rushing out of 11 personnel and limited stacked boxes. So if you open things up, I think it's going to open things up for the running game and Derrick Henry. So volume and targets is going to come down just a little bit, but you would think this would lead to longer sustained drives because we have more weapons on the offense, a little bit more touchdown upside, and higher efficiency. Efficiency has come down quite a bit year over year for Henry. If you take out certain games, looking at the games with Malik Willis last year, looking at games against the Texans over the last few years. But I think this is a perfect opportunity for him to bounce back. Now, to give a price perspective and a little bit more context, I have him valued right around a late 24 first. If I am looking to acquire Derrick Henry, he is an aging veteran. He's not somebody that you need to move that 24 first for. If you are looking to acquire, again, 12-team Superflex, 2 PPR, start 10 or 11 with 3 wide receivers, 2 running backs, I would look to package up a 24 second with somebody maybe like an Isaiah Pacheco once he gets cleared eventually, a Brian Robinson. If you're looking to cross positional, maybe they need a wide receiver, somebody like a Tyler Lockett. Maybe they need quarterback help, Jimmy Garoppolo, but somebody in that tier. And if you're part of the Dynasty Theory Patreon, you know exactly what tiers I'm talking about. I'm updating that tier sheet constantly to show everybody market inefficiencies and the opportunities at hand. But back to the price point, I have him valued at 24 first, a late 24 first, which makes sense because you'd be looking to acquire him if a contending. But running back is really the position that if I have somebody tiered with a pick, I'm always looking to buy a little bit lower and add on as opposed to move for that pick by itself. If I'm moving him, I'll take a 24 first, any 24 first, because again, assuming you don't need that production here in 2023, there very well might not be another opportunity depending on how things play out in 2023 for the Tennessee Titans. From a 23 pick perspective, there's 9 rookies. I'm clearly taking over him. And then I have him tier with a few others, but it still falls into that back end of the first value. This brings us to Ryan Tannehill and in turn, Will Levis. For me, Ryan Tannehill, I can now put a little bit more confidence in him in being my quarterback 3 on a contender. I recently took part in a startup and I had Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, and then all the way down in the 16th round, I took Ryan Tannehill. Is he going to light the world on fire? No. Has he been the most efficient quarterback the last 2 years? No. But you now add a weapon in DeAndre Hopkins, Treylon Burks bouncing back in year 2. Hopefully we see a little bit more volume and we still see that efficiency and the trend that we saw as the season progressed. And as long as Derrick Henry's not dust, this offense is still going to move through him. But if we can get back to just a glimpse of that 2020 efficiency from Ryan Tannehill, and we saw a historic run from the Tennessee Titans red zone offense, probably one of the most efficient red zone offenses ever. We saw that in 2020. I think Ryan Tannehill's ceiling is right around that quarterback 18 from a per game perspective. I had him in that 20 to 24 range, but this does bump him up a little bit. A lot of guys are very similarly tiered there from a short-term production standpoint when I'm looking at my projections, but that's where I have him now. Like I said, it gives us the confidence. If you have Ryan Tannehill and you are contending, there's no need to rush out and move him for pennies on the dollar. Hey, I got to get a little bit of value back. No, just hold on to him because it's not necessarily, the book is not necessarily closed on Ryan Tannehill beyond 2023, depending on how this plays out. I mentioned Will Levis. I want to touch on him shortly. Some people saying, well, I think this is a vote in confidence for Will Levis because now you're getting weapons to surround him. You have Hopkins on this 2-year deal and the other weapons that we've talked about throughout this episode. I don't think Will Levis had anything to do with this decision. And there are a lot of things that need to go right for Will Levis or go wrong for the Tennessee Titans and or Ryan Tannehill for Will Levis to see the field, be valuable, give you production, especially above replacement level production over the next 2 years. So I think this has a lot more to do with Ryan Tannehill and this offense and this team wanting to compete as opposed to looking at building blocks for Will Levis to allow him to develop. Certainly a lot of things can change. I think what we see throughout 2023 behind the scenes, which we don't know, obviously, but I think that's going to play out and be very critical for Will Levis. And is he developing? Is Ryan Tannehill struggling? Is this offense struggling? Will we see Will Levis? And that's going to be an interesting thing to look at throughout this entire season. We now get to the two most critical pieces here: the young assets in Traylon Burks and Chiggy Okonkwo. Both of them, like I said, especially Chiggy, hyper efficient. He led the league in yards per route run for tight ends last year. Didn't have a ton of opportunities, but even with DeAndre Hopkins landing in Tennessee, there is the expectation that we're going to see a little bit higher route participation than we saw last year. I think his yards per route run is going to come down. His targets per route run is going to come down a little bit because now, like I said, you have DeAndre Hopkins probably coming in 27, 28% on target share per route run here in 2023. And I think Ryan Tannehill is going to target him early and often. So for Chiggy, I still think he finishes in that mid tight end 2 territory for 2023. Bump him down a tier from a dynasty perspective, just because we know, even though it's a 2-year deal for Hopkins, very well could be cut down to a 1-year deal, depending on how things financially are laid out there and how this team does in 2023. But we know the short-term production really has an impact on how these guys are valued for dynasty purposes. So Chiggy, drop him down a tier. I still think he's going to be efficient, but the volume's not going to be there that we were hoping pre DeAndre Hopkins signing. And because of that, we're not going to have him hit that ceiling that so many people were hoping for. Traylon Burks, very similar. Long term, I think he's fine. I like Traylon Burks a lot, had him super high in his rookie draft. And same with Chiggy, he's dropping a tier for me. Over the next year or two, I don't see how he maintains production, barring a significant change on that team. The grass isn't always greener. If they do move on from Ryan Tannehill, is it going to be beneficial for somebody like Traylon Burks? Is DeAndre Hopkins there for 2 years, or does he fizzle out quickly like a Julio Jones or Robert Woods, like I mentioned earlier? Looking at Traylon Burks, I do think we still see that higher ADOT. He eclipsed 14 yards per reception last year. And as I mentioned with DeAndre Hopkins, I think he's going to be a little bit more underneath than we saw early in his career. Over the last 4 years, 3 of the seasons, he was at 12.2 yards per reception or less for DeAndre Hopkins. So I'm still expecting Burks to provide that big play potential and that, incredible ability after the catch to make a play. But just like I mentioned with the other pieces here, Traylon Burks' ceiling is certainly limited, and there is going to be an opportunity to buy, in my opinion, at a discounted rate over the next year. There is one thing I will say with Traylon Burks. His value will be insulated as long as we have really solid efficiency metrics. Because again, you can tell yourself that story, you can put together that narrative, and you can make those, you can put together a defense for him if he's not exactly productive in 2023. Well, it's DeAndre Hopkins, limited opportunity with the passing volume. Ryan Tannehill or Will Levis playing quarterback. Derrick Henry, they run. But if we see 2 yards per route run, if we see the yak numbers that we're expecting 4 or above, I think we're still going to see that insulation with Traylon Burks. If you're looking to go out and get Traylon Burks cheap right now, I would say hold off a little bit. The wound is still fresh. I know a lot of people, they want to get out there and they want to make a deal right away. They want to test the waters right away. I don't know about you, but I just want you to think about this. If you have a player that takes a hit from a perceived value perspective or a expected production standpoint, and you get a crap offer, you're not going to like that. And there is the potential to burn a bridge with the manager in your league because, hey, John's going out there and offering me pennies on the dollar because there is some news that just broke talking about the DeAndre Hopkins signing. And I'm not just giving away Traylon Burks. So I would say let the dust settle. Let's get closer to the season whenever points really matter. And just like I talked about with DeAndre Hopkins, not necessarily having to go out and acquire him today with Hopkins, if a contender has him, it's going to be tough to pry him away at a reasonable price. If a rebuilding team has him, that's when you test the waters on a Hopkins. If a team in the middle of the pack has him, I would kind of wait till the season rolls around because maybe they still see themselves as a contender. With Traylon Burks, it's pretty much the opposite. If a contender has them, maybe they are looking to get points. Pay attention. Not necessarily a low ball offer, but if you're looking to enter a rebuild and you have a veteran that can really bolster that trade partner's lineup, I would test those waters. If a rebuilding team has Traylon Burks, just hold off for a little bit and see if they're in the chat, see if they're sending out offers, if they update their trade bait, but don't go out there and send an offensive offer right from the start. Hopefully a few days have passed now, that dust is starting to settle, and we're seeing managers and see how they feel about their teams and the situation with Traylon Burks specifically. You look at the Tennessee Titans offense. We ran through a lot of pieces. There were hopes that a tertiary piece would really jump up here. Kyle Phillips was talked about as a slot receiver in this offense. DeAndre Hopkins joining the Tennessee Titans pretty much removes any hope and aspirations of another piece catapulting up to relevance. So I think over the next few weeks, depending on how deep benches are in your dynasty league, you're going to start to see players like Kyle Phillips potentially hit the waiver wire or be traded for fab or a fourth and, or part of a larger deal. But I think this kind of ruins hopes of any of that happening, whether it's Nick Westbrook, Kyle Phillips. So thank you, DeAndre Hopkins, for ruining the dashing the dreams, if you will, of many dynasty managers. The Tennessee Titans, there is a wide range of outcomes here looking at the ceiling versus the floor. You look at Ryan Tannehill. He could be a top 18 quarterback with his efficiency that we've seen historically, and now an upgraded wide receiver room. Or he could be on the bench in 6 weeks. Derrick Henry, he could be a top 6 running back for 2023. Or this team loses. His efficiency continues to decline, just like I mentioned earlier in the episode. And you no longer can move him until he's on a different team in 2024. And that ship of a 24 first has sailed and it's long gone. DeAndre Hopkins could be top 15 in 23, or he could be Julio Jones 2.0. Burks could be a premier wide receiver 2 on an NFL team. But it's a run-heavy offense. Do we still see the efficiency? Can he overcome those limited opportunities to stay fantasy relevant and keep his value from completely declining? Chiggy at tight end, he could improve on his 2022 efficiency. Or he stays flat from an efficiency perspective. We don't get the spike in usage in 23. And because of that, he's just going to remain an upside play on any given week with an extremely low floor and a tight end that's going to have to be hyper efficient to maintain his current dynasty value right in that tight end 13, 14 range. And I think it's going to drop a little bit more. So any of the conversations I talked about with Traylon Burks, I would also hit on with Chiggy Okonkwo. Hopefully you enjoyed this. If you did, hit the subscribe button. We have conversations like this 24/7 in the Dynasty Theory Discord. The link, it's completely free. The link is in the episode description. Come check it out. And if you're looking for any topics to be discussed, drop it in the comments. Or maybe you think I'm completely off on any of the value or the short-term production for the Tennessee Titans that I discussed today. Let me know where I'm wrong. I'll catch you guys later.